interesting, and there are so many beautiful levels to an English film. You were approached about several possible projects for your English language debut. What was it that spoke to you about Beautiful Boy and made you say yes to it?
Hi everybody. Well, so this film is based on two books, two New York Times best-selling books, and written by a father and a son, David and Nick Sheff. And so when I read those books, I really felt an immediate connection to the family, to the things they go through. As many of you probably, I too have seen addiction impact people and families from very nearby, and realize that there's still, we still look upon addiction as a moral failure, and I question myself, and I thought it was important to tell the story. I just was, really moved by this family and the fact that they believe in unconditional love.
Steve, such an amazing performance from you. This film is through the eyes of David Sheff, and we witness, along with David, sort of Nick's descent into addiction and the incredibly moving commitment that he makes to kind of never give up on Nick. How did you approach that aspect of the story, and what did you learn from getting to know the Sheffs through the making of the film?
Are we going to be past? Oh, there. Yeah, everybody turn on your phone, so. Well, I'm a dad, and I have two teenagers, and I think any parent will agree, as soon as you have kids, you are scared about their health and well-being. And for David to be going through this, I'll just use both of them. To watch a child spiraling out of control like that, and having no recourse and not knowing what to do to stem the tide is a terrifying thing. So I identified as a dad, first and foremost. And getting to know David, I didn't want to, we met, we had lunch, but I didn't want to pick him apart and make him feel like I was observing him as an actor. I just wanted to get a sense of who he was as a person, and he's kind and generous and courageous, really, to allow his story to be told in this way. Very personal, and for both he and Nick. So to allow essentially a group of strangers translated into a film, I think was a brave move.
And Timothée, such a visceral and intense performance from you. This is an unvarnished look at addiction and the depth of this family's commitment to each other. It's never lost on the audience how much love there is there. Why did you want to be a part of telling the Sheff story? And can you talk a little about your approach to the role? Oh, never mind. Free microphone.
Firstly, was there was an urgency to this story, and I think if you're economically self-sufficient as an actor, that's the dream first and foremost. But secondly, you want to work on things that feel, relevant and that people can respond to. And this was certainly that kind of movie, as Felix said. And we've all talked about it a lot recently. We've all had friends that have gone through a version of this, and a lot of young people are going through this now. So it just felt like there was integrity to this story. Secondly, I really didn't have a career at this point, so this was a job. So I was just happy to be working, really, as well.
We're going to take some questions from everybody in just a moment, but Felix, I want to ask you also that double parallel storyline that's going on, because this is such an interesting way to look at it. There's two competing viewpoints, but they merge together into one beautiful story, one beautiful film. I was wondering if there was any difficulties or kind of what some of the challenges were in combining those two memoirs.
It took time, but it was worth it. It was what makes this film really unique, and for very different people to be able to connect to this movie. Young people can go see it and maybe go see it with their parents, and vice versa. Parents want to go see it with their kids. I guess we took the time to let it blend together. David's arc is a beautiful story of a father. It's a very mythical story. Father trying to understand his son, save his son. He goes to great lengths to do that. And yeah, it comes, realizes at some point that he also needs to think about himself and the rest of his family. And what I thought was really interesting about Nick's story is that when I read Nick's book, I could really relate to it. I could relate to, being young and insecure, and Nick turns to drugs to numb that out. So I could relate to that, and I thought it was important to get that right. But most importantly, that his journey, his struggle with addiction, his trying to work hard through recovery, but the fact that a relapse is always lurking around the corner, and sometimes there is no huge trigger. It can be very small, or those little things. I wanted to get that right, because I really, when I read Nick's book, I could understand and feel and have empathy for somebody going through that, and it was important with this film to do that, to create empathy for people going through it. And also, if we could feel together for Nick, we would feel even more what David is going through.
Also does such a beautiful job of kind of connecting the memories that people have, and the aspects of addiction seems to come out of nowhere, but it also doesn't. And as David is trying to piece together the memories of Nick's childhood and where this sort of happened, I'm wondering, Steve, and actually Timothée, both of you, if the script kind of gave you little clues to find sort of those exact sort of points that kind of would play off of each other, almost echoes in some ways of David's memories of young Nick and Nick present day dealing with addiction. You can start.
Okay. No, it's an interesting question. It's tricky because in shooting the film, it wasn't shot in any sort of linear fashion. So it was all, basically we're at the mercy of locations and shooting schedules. So the shooting itself kind of jumped around. In terms of the script itself and looking for cues in terms of each other, there were certain, I think, linchpin scenes that were infinitely important to the story. One of them being the scene in the cafe, which is kind of the crux of their relationship. It's interesting because, and Felix has spoken to this, that it was an exercise. It was tricky because it was the third day of shooting, and I hadn't really seen Timothée since he had lost all of this weight, and he didn't look good. And he walked in, I mean, truly, it was shocking when he walked into the scene for the first time, and the scene played out, and we did it several times, but it was interesting how it played out because I felt very connected to him as an actor, but at the same time, within the scene, the characters aren't making any sort of connection. So that, I think, to us felt like an important moment and a good moment for us to start out with, to kind of set the groundwork for the rest of our relationship in the film.
What was the question?
That's sort of bouncing back and forth in time. And kind of maybe Steve brought up the scene in the cafe, which is such a powerful scene, and the notion of sort of that the cues that maybe the script gave you, or that speaking with the chefs and what gave you about how that dynamic worked between kind of thinking about the past, looking for clues in the past, and then the dynamic in the present as Nick is dealing with the addiction. The scene in the cafe is a terrific example of that.
I don't know, I really like how you, I like how the phrasing of that, because it's very past, present, future, and I think the biggest thing I gleaned from Tweak, the book, as opposed to Beautiful Boys kind of this all-encompassing narrative, and it's this 360 view of addiction. And I don't know if I might be wrong about this, but I think Tweak is almost entirely in the present tense, and it's just, this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and it's, that style of writing really helps, I don't know, get in the head of what that experience must have been like, it's like 1 second at a time. He wasn't thinking, a week ahead at some points. So all that said, I don't know, I mean, there were specific periods of relapse and using, but also recovery that I wanted to get right and differentiate, but almost more importantly, it felt like was to bring that urgency to it, or feeling of like, wow, this is someone who is going through this right now, or that phone call by the bridge, you know, like this could swing either way. He's either going to save himself or he's going to relapse. And certainly for that diner scene, that's one of my favorite beats in the scene, if I'm allowed to say that, is, you know, David's character, or Steve's character says, let's just have a conversation, you know, and you kind of see Nick submit to that for like 2 seconds, and then he can't get beyond the momentary need for some cash to get out of there. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I hope that answers.
Yeah, no, that's actually a great point, because Nick is sort of living in the moment by moment, kind of making momentary decisions, and David is sort of unstuck in time, thinking about everything that got him to this point, and anything that may have been clues to it. If anybody has any questions, put up a hand really high, and we'll repeat the question. Yes. Questions for Timothée, and kind of about people who are in marginalized societies, kind of working with addiction, but also maybe in the process of making the film, if you guys worked with anybody or met with anybody who was kind of talking about this kind of thing.
Well, certainly I'm not the authority on this subject in any way, and I want to say that because I feel it would be like cavalier or something to not say that. And yet, I'm working on this, and it's funny because a lot of the tenets of these programs, these rehabilitation groups, are to not speak about it publicly. So I guess without saying specific names of programs, but one very famous one in general, it's kind of amazing when you go on Google and there's something called Intergroup, I think it's called. You can go on Google and you can find, you know, meetings on specific addictions really almost everywhere in the world, and it's really an amazing thing. It's one of the misconceptions I feel I had about these programs before the movies, that they're bleak, but in reality people are joyous to be saving their lives. And so I'm sorry I don't have any things more specific beyond that, but as far as like more low-income areas or marginalized communities, again, like I said, just in my rudimentary knowledge of like Intergroup, I was shocked to see like their meetings. There are meetings everywhere almost.
Any questions more about the film here? Yes. The question is for Steve and Timothée, how they express so much raw emotion towards the end of the film, and some of those scenes where they really didn't have a lot of dialogue.
Well, if those moments worked, I would credit Felix really in terms of the way he composed them and the way he filmed them, because you know, there's certainly a lot. From a personal standpoint, every night after filming, I'd go home and I'd hug my kids really tight and just watch them. I think even more closely, and I think a lot of life plays out in silence, and I admire the fact that Felix allowed a lot of the movie to play out in silence, because and there was an economy of the script, I believe, that you don't need to describe verbally everything you're going through. Rarely do people actually do that in real life. And, you know, I use my dad as an example. He was kind of a stoic guy. He's 93 now, but he's exactly the same. And I could see what, you know, at any given point what he was going through, but he was a man of few words, is a man of few words. So I think it's just that. I think it's not so much like easy or hard. It's just, I think it's sort of a simplification. And I also commend Felix with how he filmed it, so you could, those things could register.
It's everything leading up to those moments too, and I want to thank these amazing actors for getting there, because it's, you know, the performances throughout the movie, exquisite, and it was super. You guys were so focused and committed to getting every detail right. And those scenes, a lot of those scenes we shot in the beginning of the movie, but you already like really got it right. So yeah, it was really an amazing experience to work with such talented actors.
And like Steve, I would just point to Felix again, and just the way, like it all led up to that moment, and I really like how this movie ends, because I think your inclination as a viewer is to think, okay, this is going to end very hopefully, or it's going to end very tragically, and instead it's the reality of what this is for a lot of people. It's a day at a time, and people have decades of sobriety and relapse, so it's a complex thing. So
such a moving film and a moving experience in so many ways. It opens in LA and New York this week. It will be opening across the country in the next few weeks, let people know. If I could just ask you guys to stay in your seats.
Wait, we gotta do like two, could we do two more?
Two more, one more? Two more. All right, there's something right there.
All the way back here?
We'll get back to you in 1 second. This young lady, and then we'll do stand up when it's your turn. Yeah. The question is, how did this film change Steve as a father?
I hope it didn't change me as a father. I think it made me possibly more aware as a father. The week before I started shooting, my 12-year-old son asked me whether marijuana was a gateway drug. And it blew my mind because we'd never had any sort of discussion at all about that. And the fact that, I'll tell you, it's the first movie my kids have wanted to go to the premiere.
Oh, wow.
Probably because of him. But I was so glad that they were there. And afterwards, the reception, we were talking to Felix and to David Sheff and Nick Sheff. And it really moved me, and I felt it was a good thing that they were there, and that they saw it, and that they shared it, and that they could share that experience. Because, you know, movies are work, and they're fun, and they're exciting, and they're rewarding artistically, but this one went beyond that, I think, for everyone, for all of us, because it really meant something, and it's something that so many people are dealing with. Not to put too fine a point on it, but as a dad, I just appreciated the story, and I appreciated my kids being able to take at least a glimpse into this world and gain a better understanding.
If there's a question back there, stand up, the gentleman who had the question, stand up. Yeah.
Hi, my question's for Mr. Carell. First of all, you're an absolute hunk, and I'm honored to share a name with you.
I am so glad we stayed for 2 more questions.
My second question is, I mean, obviously we're all familiar with your background in comedy. I was just curious if that helped you bring anything to your approach to a more dramatic, overtoned character. If you brought anything with you from such overtly comedic pieces to this significantly more impactful, realistic piece?
To be honest, I approach them the same way, because I look at somebody like Peter Sellers, who did all of those Pink Panther movies and Dr. Strangelove. He was known for being this amazing comedic actor, but I just saw him as a great actor because even when he went super broad, there was something very grounded about all of those characters, something human. And you never got the sense that he was aware that he was in a comedy or a drama. So I really approach both the same way. It's kind of trying to find whatever humanity is there in the character and to try to make it feel plausible and real, and as real as I can. And I think I did a lot of improv coming up, and I think that's helpful too, because it forces you, when you don't have a script, it forces you to listen. And a lot of times, if you're just thinking about the script and the words, that's all you're thinking about. You're not necessarily connecting with someone else. And I will tell you that Timothée, well, obviously he's just this fantastic actor, but to be able to play out a scene with somebody of his caliber is exciting, and I feel honored to have worked with him.